A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Storm's Unexpected Guest. The windshield wipers of Emily's Honda Civic fought a losing battle against the torrential rain as she navigated the winding road toward home. After a 12-hour shift at the county hospital, exhaustion weighed heavy on her 27-year-old shoulders. Her brown hair, slightly damp from the brief sprint between the hospital entrance and her car, clung to her neck as she leaned forward, squinting through the storm. Tonight had been particularly brutal in the emergency department. 3 car accidents from the storm, a heart attack, and a domestic violence case that had left Emily emotionally drained. She'd joined the paramedic service 5 years ago, with hopes of making a difference. But nights like this reminded her how fragile life could be. Thunder cracked overhead, illuminating the dense forest that bordered her property in stark, skeletal silhouettes. Emily had chosen this isolated house precisely for its distance from the noise and chaos of town life. But tonight the solitude felt more ominous than peaceful. The nearest neighbor lived 2 miles down the mountain road, and cell service was spotty at best. Her headlights cut through the darkness as she pulled into her gravel driveway, the familiar sight of her modest 2-story home offering little comfort against the storm's fury. Rain hammered against the roof with the intensity of machine gun fire, and the old oak trees surrounding her property swayed dangerously in the wind. Emily grabbed her medical bag and purse, steeling herself for the dash to her front door. The moment she stepped out of the car, the storm seemed to double its assault, soaking through her scrubs within seconds. She ran across the muddy yard, her sneakers squelching with each step, already planning a hot shower and the leftover Chinese takeout waiting in her refrigerator. As she fumbled with her keys on the covered front porch, a sound made her freeze. It wasn't the familiar creak of settling wood or the whistle of wind through the eaves. It was something else entirely. A low, pained whimper that seemed to come from the side of her house. Emily's paramedic training kicked in before her common sense could object. Someone or something was hurt. She set down her bags and pulled out her phone's flashlight, casting its pale beam toward the source of the sound. Her years in emergency medicine had taught her to respond first and assess danger second. What she found made her breath catch in her throat. A massive wolf lay sprawled across her side porch, its silver-white fur matted with blood and rain. The animal was enormous, easily twice the size of any wolf she'd seen in nature documentaries. Its flanks rose and fell in labored breaths, and dark stains spread across the wooden deck beneath it. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. Wolves weren't native to this area, and certainly not wolves of this size. The largest predators in these mountains were black bears and the occasional mountain lion. Yet here one lay, clearly gravely injured and seeking shelter from the storm. The rational part of her mind screamed warnings about wild animals and the dangers of approaching an injured predator, but the healer in her couldn't ignore the creature's obvious distress. She'd taken an oath to help those in need, and that oath hadn't specified species. Besides, the animal appeared too weak to pose much threat. Moving slowly, Emily approached the wolf with her hands visible and her voice soft. "Hey there, big guy. You're pretty banged up, aren't you?" The wolf's head lifted slightly, and Emily found herself staring into the most extraordinary pair of amber eyes she'd ever seen. They held an intelligence that seemed almost human, alert, aware, and strangely grateful. The creature didn't snarl or bare its teeth. Instead, it simply watched her approach with what appeared to be cautious hope. There was something unsettling about those eyes, something that made her think of old fairy tales and legends her grandmother used to tell. But Emily pushed aside such nonsense. This was injured animal, nothing more. Emily knelt beside the injured wolf, her medical training overriding her fear. Multiple lacerations scored the creature's hide, and she could see what looked like a gunshot wound in its left shoulder. Blood seeped steadily from the injuries, mixing with the rainwater that continued to pour down around them. "Someone really did a number on you," Emily murmured, gently examining the injuries without touching. The injuries looked deliberate, purposeful, not the random tears of a territorial dispute, but the calculated damage of a hunt. "But you're going to be okay. I'm going to help you." She retrieved her medical bag from the porch and returned to the wolf's side. The animal remained still as she cleaned and assessed its injuries, occasionally releasing soft whimpers that tugged at her heart. The gunshot wound was the most serious. The bullet had gone clean through, but infection was a real concern given how long the wolf had been bleeding. Emily worked by the light of her phone, using supplies from her paramedic kit to clean and dress the injuries as best she could. The wolf bore her ministrations with remarkable patience, never once showing aggression despite what had to be considerable pain. Most wild animals would have fought or fled, but this one seemed to understand she was trying to help. "There," she said finally, sitting back on her heels. "That should help, but you really need a veterinarian. I don't suppose you know any good ones around here?" The wolf's amber eyes seemed to focus on her face with startling intensity, as if it were studying her features and committing them to memory. Then something impossible happened. The air around the wolf began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Emily blinked. Certain exhaustion was playing tricks on her vision. But the shimmering intensified, and the wolf's form began to blur and shift. Bones cracked and reformed with sounds that made Emily's stomach lurch. Muscle and sinew flowed like water, reshaping themselves into familiar human proportions. Silver fur receded into smooth, pale skin. Where moments before a massive wolf had lain bleeding on her porch, now sprawled a naked man. Emily scrambled backward, her mind struggling to process what she'd just witnessed. The man was tall and powerfully built, with shoulder-length black hair and the same extraordinary amber eyes that had gazed at her from the wolf's face. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw that spoke of both nobility and wildness. Scars crisscrossed his torso, telling stories of violence and survival. "Thank you," he said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble despite his obvious weakness. He made no move to cover himself, seemingly unbothered by his nudity. "I'm sorry you had to see that. I didn't have a choice." Emily's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Her rational mind catalogued impossible facts. Wolves didn't transform into men. Shapeshifters were myths. This couldn't be happening. She had to be hallucinating from exhaustion and stress. "Please," the man continued, struggling to push himself upright against the porch railing. "I know how this looks, how impossible it seems. But I need your help. My name is Rowan, and I'm not safe here. Neither are you, now that you've aided me. I don't understand," Emily stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you? What just happened?" Rowan's amber eyes met hers with grave intensity. "Something that shouldn't exist in your world, but does. Something that may have just put you in terrible danger by accepting your kindness." As if summoned by his words, a new sound echoed through the storm. A long, haunting howl that raised the hair on Emily's arms and sent chills down her spine. Then another answered it, and another, until the night filled with the voices of what sounded like an entire pack calling through the darkness. Rowan's expression grew grim as he listened to the chorus. "They've found me," he said, amber eyes flashing with something between relief and fear. "And now they know about you." Chapter 2. The Encircling Shadows. The howls continued to echo through the storm, each one closer than the last. Emily pressed herself against the wall of her house, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The man who had been a wolf, Rowan, struggled to his feet, using the porch railing for support. "We need to get inside," he said urgently, his amber eyes scanning the darkness beyond the porch light. "Now." Emily fumbled for her keys again, her hands shaking from more than just the cold rain. "This isn't real," she muttered under her breath. "People don't just turn into wolves. I'm having some kind of breakdown from exhaustion." "You're not having a breakdown," Rowan said, his voice gentle despite the urgency of their situation. "And I understand your shock. But we don't have time for explanations right now. They're coming, and they need to see that I'm safe." The front door finally clicked open, and Emily stumbled inside, Rowan close behind her. She flicked on the lights, temporarily blinded by the sudden brightness after the darkness of the storm. When her vision cleared, she found herself face to face with a naked man in her living room, blood still seeping from his bandages. Her modest living room felt smaller with his presence filling the space. The comfortable furniture she'd carefully chosen, a navy blue couch, matching armchair, coffee table stacked with medical journals, seemed ordinary in contrast to the extraordinary situation unfolding. Wait here, she said, her medical training overriding her confusion. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a thick bathrobe, which she thrust toward him. Put this on before you bleed on my furniture. Rowan accepted the robe with what might have been a smile under different circumstances. Thank you, he said, wrapping the terry cloth around his frame. It was too small for his broad shoulders, but it provided some semblance of modesty. Emily moved to her living room window and peered through the blinds. At first, she saw nothing but her rain-soaked yard and the swaying trees. Then a flash of lightning illuminated something that made her blood run cold. Eyes. Dozens of glowing amber eyes staring at her house from the tree line, unblinking and patient. They're out there, she whispered, backing away from the window. How many are there? My pack, Rowan said, settling carefully onto her couch. He winced as the movement aggravated his injuries. They've been searching for me since the attack 3 days ago. They're not here to hurt you. They're here to protect me. Protect you from what? Emily demanded. And what do you mean, your pack? You're one person, not a... She trailed off, remembering the transformation she'd witnessed. I'm the Alpha, Rowan said simply, his amber eyes meeting hers steadily. Their leader. And yes, they're all like me. Werewolves, shapeshifters, whatever term you prefer. We've existed alongside humans for centuries, hidden in plain sight. Another howl split the night. This one so close it seemed to come from right outside her window. Emily jumped, pressing her hand to her chest as if to slow her racing heart. The sound was both beautiful and terrifying, carrying notes of longing and concern. Why are they just sitting out there? She asked. Why don't they come in and get you? Because you're human. And this is your territory, Rowan explained, shifting to ease the pressure on his injured shoulder. Ancient laws govern our kind. They won't enter a human's home without permission. But they also won't leave without me, especially when they can smell my blood and sense my weakness. Emily began to pace, her mind struggling to process the information. Her bare feet made soft sounds on the hardwood floor. This is insane. Werewolves aren't real. They're stories, myths, movies with bad special effects. I assure you, we're very real, Rowan said, watching her pace with understanding. And right now, my people are very concerned about my well-being. They can smell my blood, sense the pain I'm in. They're also aware that you've helped me, which creates complications. A new sound made them both freeze, the deliberate creak of footsteps on the front porch. Heavy boots moved with purpose across the wooden boards. Emily grabbed a poker from beside her fireplace, holding it like a weapon. Emily, Rowan said sharply, a note of command entering his voice. Put that down. They won't hurt you, but showing aggression could be misinterpreted. The front door rattled as someone tested the handle. When it didn't open, a deep voice called out from the other side. Alpha, we know you're in there. Are you badly injured? Do you need immediate medical attention? Rowan closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. I'm alive, Victor. The human helped me. She treated me. The human? The voice. Victor, apparently, carried a note of suspicion and barely concealed worry. Alpha, we need to talk. We need to assess the situation. Not tonight, Rowan called back, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the entire house. I'm too weak for a full debrief, and she's scared. Give us until dawn. That's an order. Emily heard murmuring from outside, multiple voices conferring in what sounded like heated discussion. She couldn't make out individual words, but the tone was clearly argumentative, with Victor's voice rising above the others. They don't trust me, she said, more to herself than to Rowan. They don't know you, he corrected, his amber eyes following her movements. And they're protective of their alpha. Some have been with me for years, fought beside me, bled for me. But they won't harm you. I give you my word, and my word is law in this pack. The word of a werewolf, Emily said, laughing nervously. That makes me feel so much better about the supernatural creatures surrounding my house. Rowan studied her with those unsettling amber eyes. You saved my life tonight, Emily. In our world, that creates a debt that cannot be easily dismissed. A bond of protection. You're under my safeguard now, whether you want it or not. Emily sank into the chair across from him, poker still clutched in her hands. I don't understand any of this. A few hours ago, my biggest worry was whether I had enough milk for cereal tomorrow morning. Now I've got werewolves surrounding my house and you're talking about bonds and debts. I know it's overwhelming, Rowan said softly, and for the first time since his transformation, he sounded almost vulnerable. I never intended for you to be drawn into our world. But when I was shot, when I was bleeding out in the forest with my pack scattered, something led me to your house. To you. Shot? Emily leaned forward, her medical instincts overriding her fear. Someone shot you? Who? When? Why didn't you go to a hospital? Rowan's expression darkened, amber eyes flashing with remembered anger. Another pack. One that wants to challenge my authority, take over my territory and my people. They've been hunting me for weeks, waiting for the right moment to strike when I was isolated. And tonight was that moment? Tonight was supposed to be my death, he said grimly, touching the bandage over his shoulder. But then I found you. Emily looked at him. Really looked at him. Despite the bathrobe and the bandages, despite the impossible story he was telling, there was something about him that commanded attention, an aura of power that seemed to fill the room even in his weakened state. So what happens now? She asked, finally setting down the poker. Now we wait for dawn, Rowan said, settling back against the couch cushions. And then we figure out how to keep you safe while I recover enough strength to deal with the threat to my pack. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, but the howls continued sporadically through the night. Emily could feel eyes watching her house, sense the presence of beings that defied everything she thought she knew about the world. Rowan, she said quietly, surprised by how easily his name came to her lips. Yes? When you changed, when you became human again, you looked at me like you recognized me, like you'd seen me before tonight. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes distant and thoughtful. There's something about you, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Something familiar that I can't quite place. I can't explain it. But when I saw you on that porch, when you chose to help me despite your fear, it felt like destiny. Emily shivered, and not from the cold rain that still clung to her clothes. Whatever was happening to her life, she had a feeling there was no going back to the simple existence she'd known before tonight. The pack continued their silent vigil outside, and dawn seemed very far away. Chapter 3. Blood and Silver. Emily didn't sleep so much as drift. The storm's rage had faded to a persistent hush, but something in the house, a presence, an unsettled energy, kept her suspended between dreams and waking. When dawn finally threatened, gray and heavy outside her blinds, she pushed herself upright in the chair, stiff neck and back protesting. She blinked, orienting herself, heart pounding as she remembered the night before. Rowan was still there. He lay silent and deathly pale on the couch, body twisted awkwardly despite her efforts to settle him better before she drifted off. The ridiculous bathrobe, 2 sizes too small, strained over his broad shoulders. His breathing was uneven, and the faintest gleam of sweat shone on his brow. The bandage on his shoulder bloomed with blood, bright and fresh. A warning. For a moment, Emily let herself hope the world outside had returned to normal. But when she crept to the window, careful to keep the blinds tight against the cold, she saw them. Wolves. There were more than the night before. Dozens, easily. Some sat, forms tense and eyes fixed on her porch, while others paced or nudged the edges of the lawn. Not a single one crossed over the invisible border between wild and home. She caught sight of several larger figures standing 2-legged at the edge of the trees, watching, and occasional spoke quietly. All carried an aura of dangerous discipline. Their eyes gleamed, some gold, some blue, some the uncanny shade of Rowan's own amber. Emily pressed a trembling palm to the window. What would they do if she simply ran out? Nothing, she suspected, but running did not feel like an option at all. She took a long breath and turned back. As she moved into the kitchen to put on coffee, she caught sight of Rowan shifting on the couch with a sound dangerously close to a whimper. Alarmed, Emily hurried over just as Rowan struggled to sit. "Easy," she whispered, and pressed gentle fingers to his forehead. There was a raging, unnatural heat beneath her touch. "You need fluids. You're burning up." When she tried to peel away the bloody bandage, he grimaced, voice hoarse. "Not now. Wait for Victor." She frowned, ready to argue, but before she could answer, a heavy knock startled her. She rushed to the door, heart in her throat. Standing outside was Victor, solid and controlled, his green eyes sharp as polished glass. Next to him stood another wolf, in human form, taller than Rowan, with a shaven head and wary stance. Emily unlocked the door under Rowan's nod. Victor scanned her with professional briskness, then swiftly shut the door behind him, keeping his frame between her and the world outside. "Alpha." Victor's voice was clipped, equal parts deference and disapproval. "You survived." "Barely." Rowan's breath was shallow. "It's worse, Victor. The bullet. Since last night, the pain. Something's not right." Victor advanced, examining beneath the robe. He hissed. "Should be healing, not festering like this." "What happened out there?" Rowan's face twisted in memory. "The ambush wasn't just brute force. They used new weapons. Silver. But not regular. As soon as I was hit, it felt like acid in my veins. Not just pain. Something colder." He looked between Emily and Victor. "If I'm right, it wasn't only silver. There had to be magic. Witchcraft." Emily's blood ran cold. "Magic? Real magic?" Both men nodded, the other wolf, Lucas, remaining silent, tense. Victor's jaw flexed. Rumors were that the rival pack had met with outsiders, a witch coven, exiled from the city. "If they've started enchanting ammunition," Rowan interrupted, voice weak but urgent, "that changes everything. This wasn't just an attack. It was meant to break me, break the chain of command." He winced deeply. "I should feel stronger by now. Instead, it only gets worse." Emily, wanting to understand, crouched at his side. "You need to rest. Let me try to clean this up first." She unwrapped the bandage carefully. The skin around the entry wound was blackened, throbbing with a sickly color she'd never seen on a living person. Worse than infection, more than poison. She met Rowan's gaze, and for a moment, it was as if she could feel the pain radiating through him, sharp and electric. A hesitant hand, she reached out, half expecting him to flinch away, but he only nodded. "Go ahead." She cleaned the area, wincing as Rowan's jaw clenched with pain. Then, almost unthinking, she pressed her palm to the ruined flesh, feeling for heat, for fever, the way she'd been trained. A shudder ran through Rowan's body, and Emily nearly pulled away. But there was something else. A spark. A pulse under her hand that didn't feel like a heartbeat, but like something stirring awake. Rowan gasped, amber eyes suddenly snapping open, fierce and bright. Emily felt a vivid rush, the smell of pine and earth, the sound of distant wolves. Her head spun, and for a dizzying second, she thought she heard voices. Whispers she didn't recognize. Female voices speaking an unknown tongue, singing. She stared down, realizing she hadn't taken her hand away. And under her fingertips, the blackness seemed to recede, the angry swelling shrinking. Victor saw it too. His eyes widened, darting from Rowan's shoulder to Emily's face. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," Emily whispered, shocked and a little afraid. Rowan exhaled, relief and confusion clear. "Whatever it is, don't stop." She focused, not understanding anything except the conviction that she was helping. For another long moment, her palm stayed firmly over the bullet wound, and she watched the angry, unnatural color fade further. Only when her hand began to tingle with cold did she withdraw. The three men said nothing for a moment, the only sound Rowan's breathing growing a shade steadier. Emily flexed her hand, dizzy and spent. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Victor broke the silence. "Alpha, your fever's gone down. The infection is improving." He turned to Emily, study mixed with suspicion and awe. How did you do that?" She shook her head, struggling for something logical. I don't know. I just wanted to help. That's all." Outside, a commotion broke the tension. Wolves howled, this time not in sorrow, but as if answering a challenge. Lucas pulled the curtain aside. "Rival scouts on the eastern ridge. They're testing our perimeter." Rowan shot upright, gasping from effort. Victor steadied him. "You're not going anywhere," the beta ordered. Rowan nodded. "Keep the house secure. Guard Emily at all costs. She's important now." Lucas and Victor shared a long look. Emily, still shaken from what had happened, caught the unease in their postures. "You think I'm one of them," she guessed. "A witch." "No," Rowan said softly, voice barely a rasp. "We would have known. It's not that simple. But something in you awakened just now. Some old blood, maybe. I don't know." Victor nodded, finally letting down his guard a fraction. "The old stories talk about healers and bloodlines that can resist magic." Emily pulled a blanket around her shoulders, feeling both exposed and strangely honored. "What does that make me?" Rowan smiled weakly. "Alive. And not just because you saved me, because you may have saved us all." As the morning wore on, Emily agreed to let 2 guards remain in her yard, their silent figures reminders of the thin boundary between her fragile reality and his violent world. Inside, the struggle continued. Rowan slipped in and out of restless sleep, Emily fighting fatigue while keeping his fever at bay, Victor and Lucas maintaining nervous patrols along doors and windows. Sometime near midday, Rowan awoke enough to speak. "Rest. We'll need you." He looked at Emily, gratitude naked in his eyes. Not just as a medic, as something more. Emily couldn't say what she was becoming, only that a part of her had changed forever. She squeezed his hand, feeling that strange pulse surge within her again. Outside, the ring of watchful wolves remained. But inside, as noon shadows grew long, Emily realized that her fear was transforming, slowly, into something bolder. Hope, curiosity, purpose. As dusk threatened, the pack braced for whatever would come next. And for the first time, even as danger circled, Emily felt she belonged somewhere. On this couch, in this struggle, alongside Rowan and his wolves, her own dormant power called awake. Chapter 4. The Hidden Wound. Emily did not know rest that day. If her nerves had let her sleep at all, it had been the superficial dozing of someone who feared what she might find upon waking. The storm outside, the storm inside. When her eyes fluttered open, gray light pressed against the edges of her curtains. She moved slowly, careful not to wake Rowan, whose unconscious breaths came in uneven bursts from the living room. The bathrobe clung to his too pale skin. His pain, once masked by the storm's dramas, now filled the silence, pressing out all chance of normality. The morning felt thick, heavy with threat. Emily tiptoed to the window, heartbeat racing as she looked for evidence that any of this was real. There they were. Shapeshifters shifted back into wolf form, circled around her property. Some dozed, others groomed each other, or patrolled the thin border of her yard. But always, pairs of glowing eyes kept watch on the house. She counted nearly 24 before anxiety chased her away from the glass. Her once tranquil property was surrounded by a sea of fur and muscle, all their postures tense, as if awaiting the word to act. Victor stood sentry near the door, arms folded, voice gruff as he relayed terse updates to other pack members. Garrett's rival wolves had been sighted less than half a mile away, and no one could say how many more circled in the forest beyond the visible perimeter. The threat wasn't gone. It was gathering, sharpening. The fact that Rowan was alive, barely, still anchored the pack, but Victor's eyes tracked Emily through every room, as if weighing how much more she could be trusted or needed. Ignoring the swirl of the world outside, Emily turned her focus to Rowan. She checked his injury for the 3rd time that morning. Under her hand, the blackened ring wasn't quite as swollen, but each touch sent a cold agony through him. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and he gritted his teeth, refusing to call out. The unnatural bruise radiated something sharp and alien, a wrongness that seemed to pulse up Emily's own nerves. Ignoring her own shaking hands, Emily gathered what remained of her strength. She cleaned the injury meticulously. Saline, gauze, ointment, the rituals of her profession that steadied her mind. None of it banished the sick color from the flesh. The bullet hole itself seemed deeper than plausible, as if something unseen was still burrowing, biting. Victor hovered, watching, silent. As Emily reached for fresh gauze, Rowan's hand clamped weakly around her wrist. "Wait," he managed, voice a dry scrape. "Not yet. Something's burning." Emily drew in a slow breath, searching his eyes, the gold in them dulled by fever. "Try to trust me. This is what I do." Yet she knew that what was required now had nothing to do with medicine. She pressed her palm again, acting on instinct and curiosity. The moment she did, cold knifed through her, and she squeezed her eyes shut. Somewhere just beyond the reach of reason, she heard a low chanting, feminine and mournful, a language she could not place, its cadence as certain as tide and moon. For a moment, green shadows danced behind her eyelids. Forest, fire, the echo of a drum. Her breath synchronized with Rowan's, and as she exhaled, some tension drained out of his frame. A wisp of shadow seemed to coil from the injury across her wrist. Victor stepped closer, alarmed. "Emily!" he barked, but she couldn't stop. She pressed harder, calling up every memory she had of healing, every child's scraped knee, every trauma victim she'd ever fought to save, until her body trembled with effort. Slowly, the dark at the bullet's entry lightened, bit by bit, from black to bruised purple, then angry red. When she finally pulled away, she was soaked in sweat, her legs shaky, vision swimmy with fatigue. Rowan's shoulders sagged. He was still weak, but when he opened his eyes, something bright had returned to his gaze. He squeezed her trembling hand once before she lurched back, breath heaving. "You did something," Rowan murmured, awed. "I know," she managed, shivering. "It wasn't just me. I saw something. Heard voices. Women. Old. Like family I never knew." Her fingers tingled where she'd touched him, a tingling both foreign and tantalizing. Victor was staring at her, wariness now mingled with hope. "That wasn't medicine," he said. "That was old magic, powered by blood and intent." He hesitated, as if torn. "The stories. They said sometimes witches and wolves used to fight together. It never ended well. But if you're something hybrid, we should know." Emily pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them, the muggy air swirling with fear and unease. Rowan mumbled something that, had it been anyone else, she would have written off as delirium. "Maybe that's why the bullet didn't kill me outright. Your touch. It shielded me." The day passed in anxious routine. Emily moved about the house as if sleepwalking, boiling water for broth, checking Rowan's pulse, allowing Victor or one of the other guards into the kitchen for brief, hushed strategizing. Shifter patrols changed every few hours, the guards just inside the door silently tense, scarred and watchful. Through snatches of overheard conversation, Emily gathered that Garrett's pack had grown bolder since sensing Rowan's vulnerability. There had been fights on the north fence. Someone claimed to have seen a hunched, cloaked figure with Garrett. A supposed witch, face hidden, muttering to herself as she worked symbols into the dirt. Every wolf in the room shuddered. Emily listened, trying to absorb everything even as fatigue threatened to drown her. By afternoon, Rowan's fever returned. Emily found herself kneeling beside him, voice shaking as she tried everything a human could, even more saline, blanket for warmth, window open for cool air. None of it worked. The injury darkened, skin around it looking almost ulcerated. Rowan's breathing became labored, and panic threatened to overwhelm her reason. Victor cornered her in the hall. "If you're truly descended from witches, there may be more you can do for him. If not, we lose him tonight." Anger and desperation swirled in Emily's chest. "Fine. Tell me what to do." He guided her beside Rowan, who now bordered on unconsciousness. The pack assembled, tense and silent. Emily, trusting nothing but instinct, tried again. Her hand on his wound, she focused on the memory of those chanting women, the sense of being more than flesh. A strange, ancient lullaby rose in her chest. She didn't know the words, but her lips shaped them with certainty. A prayer for cleansing, renewal. In that twilight between worlds, she thought she felt hands resting over hers, soft and ancient, passing strength, kindling a spark of belonging beneath her ribs. Her head spun. The magic was draining, but purposeful. Unseen energy pulled the infection. The magic, the wrongness away from Rowan and into herself. Rowan gasped, bolted upright, and for the first time since all this began, looked truly alive. He gripped Emily's hand hard. "Thank you," he whispered, and a surge of emotion, bright and fierce, passed between them. The pack exhaled as one. Victor nodded, approval in his eyes. He'll heal now. The worst is gone. Yet his gaze lingered on Emily, a glimmer of fear shadowing his respect. Magic always has a cost. Make sure you can live with it. Emily nearly collapsed as she stood. Rowan's improvement was as dramatic as his prior decline. He slept deeply, peacefully, the fever broken, color returning to his cheeks. The black injury had faded to a faint, angry scar. As dusk fell and wolves outside howled a warning, Garrett's scouts had been seen closer still. Emily curled beside Rowan, letting exhaustion claim her at last. She sank into uneasy sleep, the voices of those ancient women swirling in her dreams, reminding her she was not alone. Not anymore. That night, the pack found courage. If the rival wolves tried to overrun them at dawn, they'd face not just claws and fangs, but something new. Something as old as legend, and as real as the blood that bound all of them now. Chapter 5. Into the wilderness. Dawn came with the scent of danger on the wind. Emily stirred from fitful sleep on the couch beside Rowan, her body aching from the magical exertion of the night before. The house felt different, charged with tension that seemed to press against the walls themselves. She could hear hushed, urgent voices from the kitchen, where Victor and several pack members had been strategizing since before sunrise. Rowan was awake, sitting upright for the first time in days. The transformation was remarkable. Color had returned to his skin, and his amber eyes held their natural intensity once more. The injury on his shoulder had healed to a thin, silvery scar. He caught Emily's gaze and offered a weak but genuine smile. "You saved my life," he said simply, his voice still hoarse but stronger than it had been. "More than that, you saved my pack." Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I still don't understand what happened, what I did." Before Rowan could answer, voices from the kitchen rose sharply. Emily caught fragments of heated argument, distrust, worry about outsiders, questions about her true nature. Victor's voice cut through the debate, authoritative but strained. She healed him when nothing else could. "That's all that matters right now." Another voice, unfamiliar and harsh. "But what if she's working with them? What if this is all part of some larger trap?" Rowan's jaw tightened. He rose slowly, testing his strength, then moved toward the kitchen with Emily close behind. The scene that greeted them was tense. 5 pack members clustered around her small table, maps spread before them, faces etched with exhaustion and suspicion. The unfamiliar speaker was a lean man with prematurely gray hair and scars across his neck. Someone who'd seen too much violence. His eyes locked onto Emily with open hostility. "Alpha, with respect, we don't know what she is. Witches have tricked us before. How do we know this isn't exactly what Garrett wants?" "Because she could have let me die," Rowan replied, his voice carrying absolute authority despite his recent weakness. "Because she risked herself to heal me when she had no obligation to do so. Because every instinct I possess tells me she can be trusted." Emily stepped forward, surprising herself with her boldness. "I understand your concerns. A few days ago, I didn't even believe werewolves existed. But I'm not your enemy. Whatever's happening to me, whatever these abilities are, I want to help." The scarred man, introduced as Connor, remained unconvinced. "Convenient that your powers awakened just as our Alpha was dying from a witch's curse." Victor slammed his palm on the table. "Enough. The Alpha has made his decision. Emily stays under our protection, and we move forward together." The tension was interrupted by a commotion outside. Wolves barking in alarm, paws thundering across the yard. Victor was at the window instantly, his face going pale. Movement in the eastern woods, multiple contacts approaching fast. Rowan moved with fluid grace despite his recent ordeal, peering through the blinds. Garrett's making his move. Everyone to positions. The world exploded into chaos. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. Through the windows, Emily saw wolves, larger and more savage-looking than Rowan's pack, pouring from the tree line. Their eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence, and their coordination spoke of careful planning. At their head ran a massive black wolf with silver markings, Garrett in his shifted form. Victor barked orders, and pack members scattered to defensive positions. Some shifted mid-stride, clothes tearing as they took wolf form to meet the attackers. The sound of snarling and snapping filled the air, punctuated by human shouts and the crack of gunfire. In the midst of the chaos, Emily lost sight of Victor. She pressed herself against the kitchen wall as Rowan coordinated his pack's defense, his voice carrying clearly over the din. Despite his recent weakness, he commanded with absolute authority, every gesture precise and purposeful. But something was wrong. The attack felt too focused, too deliberate. Through the window, Emily saw Victor pursuing 3 wolves toward the forest edge, and realized too late that it was a trap. "Rowan!" she called out. But he was already in motion, having seen the same thing. Together they watched helplessly as Victor disappeared into the woods, outnumbered and cut off from support. The attacking wolves retreated as suddenly as they'd come, leaving Rowan's pack bloodied but intact. The silence that followed was worse than the chaos. It spoke of calculated victory rather than defeat. "They took Victor," Rowan said grimly, surveying the aftermath. "This wasn't an attempt to kill me. It was a kidnapping." Emily felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why would they want Victor alive? Leverage, information, or, Rowan's expression darkened, bait. As the pack tended their wounded and secured the perimeter, Emily found herself pacing anxiously. Something tugged at the edges of her consciousness. A sensation she couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. It was as if invisible threads connected her to the forest beyond, carrying whispers of danger and pain. "I can find him," she said suddenly, surprising everyone, including herself. Connor scoffed. "How? You're not a tracker. You can't even shift to follow scent trails." But Emily was already moving toward the door, drawn by an instinct deeper than thought. "I don't need to track him. I can feel him. Feel where they took him." Rowan caught her arm gently. "Emily, it's too dangerous. They're expecting us to follow." She looked into his amber eyes, seeing concern and something else. "Trust, despite everything. Then we don't give them what they expect. We use every advantage we have." As they prepared to leave, Emily gathered supplies with hands that seemed to know what to do without conscious direction. Salt from her kitchen cabinet, candles from her emergency kit, a silver pendant that had belonged to her grandmother. Items that felt suddenly significant in ways she couldn't explain. The search party was small. Just Emily, Rowan, and 2 of his most trusted pack members. The others remained to guard the house and tend the wounded. As they entered the forest, Emily felt the weight of ancient trees pressing down around them, thick with shadow and secret paths. Her new senses came alive in the wilderness. She could feel the corruption that Garrett's witch ally had brought to this place. Dark magic that left trails like oil on water, visible only to those with the sight to see them. The very air tasted wrong in certain spots, heavy with malevolent intent. "This way," Emily whispered, leading them along a game trail that went deeper into the mountains. She could sense Victor's presence like a distant star, faint but constant, pulling her forward. Rowan stayed close beside her, his proximity both comforting and distracting. She found herself hyper-aware of his movements, the way he seemed to flow through the forest like he belonged there. When branches threatened to catch her clothing, his hand would appear to guide her safely past. When loose rocks shifted under her feet, he was there to steady her. "How do you know which way to go?" he asked quietly, as they paused at a stream crossing. Emily knelt by the water's edge, letting her fingers trail in the current. The sensation that guided her was difficult to describe. Part intuition, part something deeper and older. "I can feel the places where their magic has touched the forest. It's like seeing smoke from a fire." The trail leads upstream. They crossed carefully, water icy against their skin. On the far side, Emily suddenly stopped, every nerve in her body screaming warnings. "Wait," she breathed, grabbing Rowan's arm. He froze instantly, trusting her instinct. Emily closed her eyes, extending her supernatural senses. There, 50 yards ahead, a cluster of symbols carved into a massive oak tree. The magic radiating from them was hostile, designed to disorient and trap anyone who passed too close. "Ambush," she whispered. "They've marked the trees. Anyone following the obvious path would walk straight into their snare." Rowan's eyes widened with newfound respect. "Can you sense a way around?" Emily nodded, leading them in a wide arc through dense underbrush. The detour was treacherous. Thorns caught at their clothes, and the ground was unsteady with fallen logs and hidden roots. But her magical senses kept them clear of the trapped zones, weaving between pockets of dark influence like a sailor navigating hidden reefs. As they climbed higher into the mountains, Emily became increasingly aware of Victor's distress. The emotional resonance of his captivity pressed against her consciousness. Fear, anger, pain, but also determination. He was fighting them, making their work harder. "He's alive," she assured Rowan during a brief rest. Hurt, but fighting. Something passed between them in that moment, a connection deeper than words. Rowan's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Thank you," he said simply. "For everything. For saving me. For this. For staying when you could have run." Emily felt warmth spread through her chest, a sensation that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with the man beside her. "I couldn't run," she admitted. "Not anymore." The afternoon wore on as they tracked deeper into hostile territory. Emily's abilities grew stronger with use, allowing her to sense not just Victor's location, but the magical defenses surrounding their destination. Garrett's witch ally had been busy. The entire valley ahead crawled with protective spells and warning charms, but Emily was learning to read the patterns, to find the gaps in their enemy's magical armor. With each step forward, she felt more connected to the ancient power flowing through her veins. The voices of her ancestors seemed to whisper guidance, their knowledge becoming her own. As sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they finally crested a ridge overlooking their destination, an abandoned mining camp nestled in a narrow canyon. Victor was there, Emily was certain. But between them and their objective lay a maze of magical traps that would challenge every skill she'd discovered. Rowan looked at her with complete trust, ready to follow wherever she led. The weight of responsibility settled on Emily's shoulders, but with it came something she'd never felt before. Absolute certainty in her purpose. The rescue was about to begin, and Emily knew that after tonight, nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 6. The Price of Magic. The abandoned mining camp lay before them like a wound carved into the mountain's flesh. Emily crouched behind a boulder on the ridge, studying the valley below through the gathering dusk. The camp consisted of several ramshackle buildings clustered around the mouth of an old mine shaft, all connected by rickety wooden walkways that groaned in the evening wind. Magical energy pulsed from the settlement in waves, dark, twisted currents that made her teeth ache. "I count at least a dozen guards," Rowan whispered beside her, his amber eyes reflecting the last light of sunset. Half in wolf form, half human. They're positioned to cover all the approaches. Emily nodded, but her attention was focused elsewhere. The magical defenses surrounding the camp were far more dangerous than any physical guards. She could see them layered like a spider's web. Illusion spells designed to turn rescuers around in circles. Psychic barriers that would fill approaching minds with paralyzing fear, and worse things lurking in the shadows between perception and reality. "Victor's in the largest building," she said with certainty, pointing to a structure that had once been the mine foreman's office. "But there's something else. The witch. She's there too. I can feel her magic like a poison in the air." Lucas, one of the pack members who'd accompanied them, shifted nervously. "How do we get through all those defenses?" Emily closed her eyes, extending her newfound senses outward. The magical web was complex, but she was beginning to understand its patterns. Each spell was anchored to specific points. Carved symbols on trees, buried talismans, blood sacrifices hidden in the shadows. Find the anchor points, and the spells could be unraveled. "I can get us through," she said finally, "but it's going to be dangerous. The magic will fight back when I start breaking it down." Rowan's hand found her shoulder, warm and reassuring. "Tell us what you need." As they descended into the valley, Emily felt the first tendrils of hostile magic reaching toward them. The path seemed to shift and blur, trying to lead them astray. Whispers echoed from the trees, speaking of failure and death, designed to fill their hearts with doubt. But Emily pushed forward, her inherited knowledge guiding her past each trap. The first real obstacle came as they reached the camp's outer perimeter. A wall of pure terror slammed into their minds, a psychic barrier designed to send intruders fleeing in panic. Emily saw Lucas stumble, his face pale with sudden, inexplicable dread. Even Rowan tensed, fighting against the supernatural fear. Emily stepped forward, drawing on reserves of power she was only beginning to understand. She placed her hands against the invisible barrier, feeling its malevolent intelligence pressing back against her. The fear was real, fed by the genuine terror of previous victims, woven into a weapon of pure emotion. By blood and bone, by earth and stone, she whispered, words rising from some deep ancestral memory. By the light that burns in darkness, I deny you passage to our hearts. The barrier shattered like glass, fragments of psychic energy dissipating into the night air. But the effort left Emily gasping, a sharp pain lancing through her skull. Rowan steadied her as she swayed. The cost is getting higher, he observed quietly. Emily wiped blood from her nose, tasting copper. Victor's worth it. They moved deeper into the camp, encountering layer after layer of magical defenses. Illusions tried to turn them against each other. Emily saw Rowan's face twist into something monstrous, heard Lucas screaming accusations that she was betraying them. Each time, she fought back with growing desperation, unraveling the spells with techniques that came to her as if remembered from dreams. But each victory weakened her further. By the time they reached Victor's prison, Emily could barely stand upright. Her hands shook uncontrollably, and her vision kept blurring in and out of focus. The magical energy she'd been drawing upon was taking its toll on her mortal frame. Through the grimy window of the foreman's office, they could see Victor tied to a chair. He was bloodied but conscious, his green eyes alert and defiant. 2 guards flanked him, one human, one a massive gray wolf with intelligent yellow eyes. And in the shadows at the back of the room stood a figure that made Emily's blood run cold. The witch was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles carved deep by years of dark practice. Her hair hung in stringy white tendrils, and her clothes were layers of tattered black fabric that seemed to absorb light. When she turned toward the window, her eyes were solid black, not a trace of white or iris visible. "She knows we're here," Emily breathed, feeling those obsidian eyes boring into her soul. The witch smiled, revealing teeth filed to sharp points. She raised her hands, and Emily felt a new attack begin. Not aimed at their minds or hearts, but at their very life force. The air around them began to thicken like tar, each breath becoming a struggle. "She's trying to suffocate us with our own breath," Emily gasped, recognizing the spell. "Everyone stay calm. Don't fight it directly." Instead of resisting the magical assault, Emily reached deeper into herself than ever before. She felt the presence of her ancestors more clearly now. Generations of women who had stood against the darkness, who had paid prices in blood and spirit to protect those they loved. Their power flowed into her, but she could feel it burning through her like acid. The suffocation spell shattered, but 3 more took its place. The witch was powerful, her magic honed by decades of practice. Emily found herself fighting on multiple fronts, maintaining shields to protect her companions, while simultaneously attacking the spells holding Victor prisoner. "I can't hold this much longer," she warned through gritted teeth. Blood was flowing freely from her nose now, and her hands had begun to tremble violently. Rowan and Lucas moved into action, using Emily's magical cover to break into the building. The human guard fell quickly to Rowan's claws, but the wolf proved more dangerous. As the 2 massive shapes rolled and snarled across the floor, Emily felt her concentration slipping. The witch struck then, sending a bolt of pure malice directly at Emily's heart. She barely managed to deflect it, but the effort sent her to her knees. The building around them began to shake as competing magical forces tore at the foundations of reality. Victor's bonds snapped under Rowan's desperate strength, but as they prepared to flee, the witch played her final card. From hidden positions around the camp, more guards emerged. But these weren't ordinary wolves. They moved wrong, their eyes glowing with unnatural light, black veins visible beneath their fur. Enchanted, Emily realized with horror. She's poisoned them with dark magic. The corrupted wolves attacked with mindless savagery, feeling no pain, showing no mercy. Worse, their claws and teeth carried the same dark poison that had nearly killed Rowan. Each wound they inflicted would fester and spread unless Emily could cleanse it immediately. She threw herself into the battle with desperate fury, pouring every ounce of remaining power into healing and protection spells. She purged poison from Lucas as he staggered under a vicious bite. She shielded Victor from claws that would have ripped out his throat. She turned aside attacks that would have crippled Rowan, just as he was regaining his strength. But with each spell, each desperate intervention, Emily felt herself burning out like a candle in a hurricane. The magical energy was consuming her from within, demanding a price her mortal body couldn't afford to pay. When the last corrupted wolf fell, she collapsed completely, her consciousness flickering like a dying flame. Through the haze of exhaustion, she heard voices arguing around her. Some of the pack members who had arrived as reinforcement were voicing doubts about her nature and her power. "She's too dangerous." Connor's harsh voice cut through the discussion. "That much power in untrained hands. Look what it's done to her. What happens when she loses control? She saved us," Victor countered, his own voice weak but determined. "All of us. Without her, I'd be dead, and probably Rowan too." But Emily barely heard the debate. She was floating in a space between consciousness and oblivion, her spirit scattered like leaves in a windstorm. The voices of her ancestors called to her, offering rest, offering peace, but also warning her that if she let go now, she might not find her way back. Then she felt strong arms lifting her, cradling her with infinite care. Rowan's scent surrounded her, pine and earth and something uniquely his that made her feel safe even in the darkness. "She's burning up," she heard him say, his voice tight with concern. "Her pulse is racing, but her breathing's too shallow. I've never seen the alpha like this," Victor murmured to someone else, wonder coloring his words. "Not about anyone. He's carrying her like she's made of glass." Emily tried to open her eyes, to speak, to reassure them that she would be all right. But the effort was beyond her. The magical exhaustion had drained something essential from her spirit, leaving her as fragile as morning frost. As they carried her away from the ruined mining camp, Emily felt the boundaries between her consciousness and the magical world growing thin. She could sense every pack member's emotions, could feel the wildlife in the forest stirring at their passage, could taste the lingering traces of the witch's malevolent power on the night air. The abilities that had saved them all were refusing to quiet down, burning through her system like a fever. She was connected to everything now, the earth beneath them, the stars above, the complex web of relationships binding the pack together. It was beautiful and terrible and completely overwhelming. Through it all, Rowan's steady heartbeat against her ear served as an anchor to sanity. His arms never loosened their protective hold, and she could feel his worry radiating outward like heat from a forge. Whatever was happening between them, whatever connection had sparked that first night, it was growing stronger with each passing hour. As they finally reached the safety of Emily's house, she managed to whisper a single word, "Rowan." His response was immediate, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm here. You're safe. Just rest now." Emily let herself sink into the darkness then, trusting him to watch over her while she fought to rebuild her shattered defenses. The battle was won, but the war for her soul and her heart was just beginning. Chapter 7. Circle of Shadows. Emily drifted back to consciousness like a swimmer rising from dark depths. Her body felt hollow, drained of something essential she couldn't name. The magical exhaustion from the rescue had left her spirit scattered, her defenses in tatters. As awareness slowly returned, she became conscious of voices around her. The pack gathered in her living room, their tones urgent and concerned. "The witch escaped," Victor was saying, his voice still rough from his captivity. "She vanished before we could pursue. That level of dark magic. She'll be back. and next time she'll be prepared for Emily's abilities. Emily tried to sit up, but strong hands gently pressed her back against the couch cushions. Rowan's amber eyes met hers, filled with relief and something deeper, an intensity that made her pulse quicken despite her weakness. "Easy," he murmured, his fingers brushing her forehead to check for fever. "You've been unconscious for hours. Your magical reserves are completely depleted." "Victor?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Safe, thanks to you," Victor replied, moving into her line of sight. His face bore fresh cuts and bruises, but his green eyes were alert and grateful. "Emily, what you did back there, I've never seen power like that. You didn't just break their spells. You unraveled them completely." Emily struggled to focus through the fog of exhaustion. Something nagged at her consciousness, a sense of unfinished business, of danger still lurking just beyond perception. "The witch," she said suddenly. There was something familiar about her. Something. Her words were cut off by a sound that chilled everyone in the room. A low, mournful howl that seemed to come from all directions at once. It was joined by others, creating a chorus that spoke of challenge and coming war. The pack members tensed, hands moving instinctively toward weapons. Rowan was on his feet instantly, his body language shifting into full alpha mode. "They're here," he said grimly. Garrett's brought his entire pack. Through the windows, Emily could see shapes moving in the darkness. Dozens of wolves emerging from the forest in a coordinated assault. But these weren't the random attacks they'd faced before. This was an army, disciplined and purposeful, moving with the precision of a military operation. At their head walked Garrett in human form, a tall, lean man with silver-streaked blonde hair and cold blue eyes. He moved with predatory grace, every step calculated to project dominance and control. Beside him walked the witch, her ancient face twisted in a smile of malevolent anticipation. "Alpha Rowan," Garrett called out, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. "You've caused me considerable trouble. Time to end this charade." Rowan stepped onto the porch, Emily's pack forming a protective barrier behind him. Despite his recent recovery, he radiated power and authority, every inch the Alpha King his people believed him to be. "This ends tonight, Garrett," Rowan replied, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of command. "Your witch's poison failed. Your kidnapping failed. You have no more cards to play." The witch stepped forward, her black eyes fixed on Emily, who had managed to rise despite her weakness. When she spoke, her voice was like rusty nails scraping stone. "Oh, but I do have one more card, dear Alpha. You see, your little healer and I share something special." The witch's smile widened, revealing those filed teeth. "Blood calls to blood, doesn't it, child?" Emily felt ice form in her veins. The familiarity she'd sensed, the strange connection she'd felt to the magical attacks. It all suddenly made terrible sense. "That's impossible," Emily whispered. But even as she spoke, she could feel the truth of it resonating in her bones. "My great-granddaughter," the witch continued, her voice dripping with mock affection, "born of the line that betrayed us, that chose the mundane world over the power that was their birthright. But power always finds a way, doesn't it? Even diluted by generations of weak blood. It still flows in your veins." The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. Her magical abilities, the voices she'd been hearing, the ancient knowledge that had seemed to come from nowhere, it all traced back to this creature of shadows and malice. "You're lying," Victor snarled, but Emily could see the doubt in his eyes, the fear that maybe the witch spoke truth. The witch laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, child, the lie is what you've been living. Did you think your powers came from nowhere? Did you think you were some kind of chosen savior?" Her expression turned vicious. "You're the descendant of murderers and oath-breakers. Your bloodline has been cursed for 3 generations. Emily felt the world spinning around her. Everything she'd discovered about herself, every moment of growing confidence in her abilities, was it all tainted by this connection to darkness? But then Rowan's hand found hers. Warm and steady and absolutely certain. "It doesn't matter where the power comes from," he said firmly, his amber eyes blazing with conviction. "What matters is how you choose to use it, And you've chosen to heal, to protect, to save lives. That's who you are, Emily. The witch's expression twisted with rage. Touching. But blood will tell, dear Alpha, and tonight she'll see what her true heritage demands. The battle erupted without warning. Garrett's pack surged forward in a coordinated assault, half shifting to wolf form, while the others maintained human shape to use weapons. The witch began chanting, her hands weaving patterns in the air that left trails of sickly green light. Emily tried to rally her depleted magical defenses, but the exhaustion was too severe. When she reached for power, she found only emptiness where her reserves should have been. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as she realized how helpless she was. But Rowan was there, moving with fluid grace between his human and wolf forms, as the situation demanded. When enemies closed in on Emily, he appeared like a force of nature, claws and fangs tearing through anything that threatened her. His protective fury was absolute, primal, a display of dominance that sent even hardened warriors scrambling for safety. Victor flanked Emily's other side, using his smaller frame and tactical knowledge to direct the pack's defense. Despite his recent ordeal, he fought with the desperate courage of someone protecting family. The battle raged across Emily's property, transforming her peaceful home into a war zone. Windows shattered under the impact of thrown bodies. Furniture splintered as shifted wolves crashed through walls. The very air crackled with competing magical energies as Emily and the witch engaged in a supernatural duel despite Emily's weakness. As the fight continued, Emily began to understand something crucial about her heritage. Yes, she was connected to this creature of darkness, but she was also connected to every other witch in their bloodline, including those who had fought against corruption and chose light over shadow. The voices she'd been hearing weren't just from her immediate ancestors. They were from every generation that had struggled with the choice between power and principle. Drawing on this revelation, Emily found a new source of strength. Not magical power in the traditional sense, but something deeper. The accumulated wisdom and determination of every woman in her line who had refused to let darkness define her. The witch sensed the change immediately. "No!" she shrieked, her own spells faltering as Emily's renewed confidence disrupted her concentration. "You cannot deny what you are." "I don't deny it," Emily replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I embrace it, all of it, the light and the shadow, the power and the responsibility. But I choose how to use what I've inherited." The final confrontation came as Garrett, bloodied but still dangerous, made a desperate lunge for Emily's throat. Rowan intercepted him mid-leap, the two alphas crashing together in an explosion of violence that shook the ground beneath their feet. They fought in both forms, human and wolf, claws and fists, primal fury and calculated strategy. Rowan's recent recovery had left him strong, but not at full power, while Garrett fought with the desperation of someone who knew this was his last chance. Emily, seeing Rowan begin to falter, made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She opened herself completely to her heritage, not just the light she'd been drawing upon, but the shadow as well, the witch's power. The darkness that ran through their shared bloodline became hers to command. "By blood and shadow, by light and darkness," she chanted, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to come from multiple throats. "By the price paid in pain and the strength earned through choice, I claim what is mine by right." The magic that erupted from Emily was unlike anything she'd channeled before. It was raw, elemental, touched by both creation and destruction. It flowed into Rowan, healing his wounds and amplifying his strength, but it also lashed out at their enemies with the fury of generations of suppressed power. Garrett fell before Rowan's renewed assault, his body broken but not destroyed. The rival Alpha would live, but his power was shattered, his pack scattered. He would never again pose a threat to Rowan's leadership. But the witch proved more resilient. Even as Emily's power battered her defenses, she managed to retreat, her form dissolving into shadow and mist. "This isn't over, child," her voice echoed from the darkness. "You've tasted the shadow now. It will call to you, corrupt you, turn everything you love to ash. Blood tells, Emily. It always tells." As dawn broke over the battlefield, Emily collapsed again. But this time it was exhaustion born of victory, rather than defeat. She had found her true power, claimed her full heritage, and discovered that she was strong enough to choose light, even when darkness offered easier paths. Rowan gathered her into his arms, his own body battered but triumphant. As he held her close, Emily felt something shift between them, a connection deeper than gratitude or attraction, something that spoke of shared destiny and unbreakable bonds. The war was won, but Emily knew the witch's words carried a kernel of truth. The shadow would always be part of her now, a constant temptation and a source of power she would have to learn to master. But she wouldn't face that challenge alone. Looking into Rowan's amber eyes, seeing the absolute trust and growing love reflected there, Emily knew she had found something worth fighting for, worth choosing light for, again and again, no matter how appealing the darkness might become. Chapter 8. Dawn of Understanding. The first light of dawn painted Emily's property in shades of gold and amber, revealing the full scope of the night's devastation. Her once peaceful home looked like a war zone. Windows shattered, furniture destroyed, scorch marks from magical fire blackening the walls. Yet as Emily surveyed the damage from Rowan's protective embrace, she felt an unexpected sense of completion rather than loss. The battle was over. Garrett's broken pack had fled into the wilderness, their alpha defeated but alive. A mercy that spoke to Rowan's strength and Emily's growing influence on his decisions. The immediate threat was ended, but Emily knew that larger questions remained unanswered, hanging in the morning air like mist waiting to be burned away by the sun. Victor approached them carefully, his green eyes assessing Emily with a mixture of respect and lingering uncertainty. Despite his gratitude for the rescue, she could see him struggling with the implications of what he'd witnessed. Her connection to the witch, the dark power she'd wielded, the way shadow and light had flowed through her with equal ease. "The perimeter is secure," Victor reported to Rowan, though his gaze remained fixed on Emily. No signs of pursuit. Garrett's remaining followers scattered when their alpha fell. "It'll be weeks before they regroup, if they ever do." Rowan nodded, but his attention was entirely focused on Emily. His hands moved gently over her face, checking for injuries, his amber eyes dark with concern and something deeper, an intensity that made her breath catch despite her exhaustion. "You took an incredible risk," he said softly, his voice carrying both admiration and worry. "Opening yourself to both sides of your heritage like that. Emily, you could have been consumed by the darkness. What made you think you were strong enough to control it?" Emily met his gaze steadily, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "Because I wasn't alone. Because I had something worth fighting for. People worth protecting. The darkness is part of me now. But so is the light. I get to choose which one guides my actions." A commotion near the tree line drew their attention. The remainder of Rowan's pack was emerging from the forest, carrying their wounded and assessing the aftermath of battle. Some looked at Emily with obvious gratitude. She had saved their alpha, their beta, had turned the tide of a war that could have destroyed them all, but others watched her with wariness, uncertain what to make of a human who wielded power that rivaled their own alpha's supernatural strength. Connor, the scarred man who had questioned Emily's presence from the beginning, approached with obvious reluctance. His clothes were torn from the fight, and dried blood marked several wounds, but his bearing remained proud and defensive. "Alpha," he said formally, then turned to Emily with visible effort. "I owe you an apology, and a debt. You saved us all tonight, despite my doubts about your intentions." He paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. "I was wrong to question your loyalty." Emily nodded acceptance of his apology, but her attention was drawn to the deeper currents of emotion flowing through the gathered pack. She could sense their feelings now with startling clarity. Gratitude mixed with fear, respect tempered by uncertainty about her true nature. The magical awakening had left her more connected to the supernatural world than ever before, able to feel the complex web of relationships and loyalties that bound these people together. "We need to talk," Rowan said quietly, his hand finding hers with natural ease. "All of us. About what happened tonight. About what it means for the future." As the pack settled into a rough circle on Emily's lawn, the morning sun climbing higher and chasing away the last shadows of night, Emily felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. Everything in her life had changed in the span of a few days. Her quiet, predictable existence as a paramedic was gone forever, replaced by something both terrifying and exhilarating. Rowan spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of absolute leadership, but also a gentleness that was meant specifically for her. "Emily, what you've done for us, for me, goes beyond any debt or obligation. You saved my life, saved Victor's life, potentially saved this entire pack from destruction. But more than that, you've proven yourself to be someone we can trust completely, someone worthy of our protection and loyalty." He paused, his amber eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "But I won't ask you to give up your old life without offering you a choice. You could walk away from all of this, return to your work at the hospital, to the human world where things make sense and magic isn't a daily reality. We would protect you from a distance, make sure you're never threatened by supernatural forces again. You could have your normal life back." Emily felt her heart constrict at the thought. Return to her old life. Pretend none of this had happened. That she hadn't discovered a heritage spanning generations of women who had wielded power beyond imagination. Pretend she hadn't felt the soul-deep connection that had sparked between her and Rowan from the moment she'd first touched his wounded form. Or, she asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. Rowan's expression softened, hope flickering in his eyes. "Or you could stay. Learn about your heritage. Master the powers you've inherited, both light and shadow. Help us navigate the supernatural world. Serve as a bridge between the human and shifter communities. Be part of something larger than yourself." Victor stepped forward, adding his voice to Rowan's offer. "The pack needs someone like you, Emily. Not just for your healing abilities, though those are invaluable. We need your perspective, your medical training, your natural compassion. You make us stronger, more than the sum of our individual parts." Emily looked around the circle of faces, some friendly, some still uncertain, all watching her with varying degrees of hope and expectation. These people had become more than strangers who had disrupted her life. They were family, bound together by loyalty and shared purpose, and they were offering to make her part of that bond. But it was Rowan's face that held her attention, Rowan's quiet intensity that spoke to something deep in her soul. The connection between them had grown stronger with each passing hour, each shared crisis. When she looked at him, she saw not just the powerful alpha who commanded absolute loyalty from his pack, but also the man who had trusted her completely when trust should have been impossible, who had protected her even when doing so put him at risk. "I need time to process all of this," Emily said finally, her voice steady, despite the enormity of the decision before her. "My whole understanding of reality has been turned upside down. I've discovered I'm descended from witches, that I can channel forces I don't fully understand, that there's an entire hidden world operating alongside the human one I've always known." Rowan nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere." As the day wore on, the pack worked together to secure the area and tend to their wounded. Emily found herself naturally falling into a role as healer and mediator, using both her medical training and her growing magical abilities to ease pain and accelerate healing. She worked alongside Victor to inventory their resources, consulted with Connor about defensive strategies for the future, and spent long hours in quiet conversation with pack members who sought to understand this strange new ally who had appeared so suddenly in their lives. But it was during the quiet moments with Rowan that Emily felt most centered, most herself. They talked about everything and nothing: her childhood, his responsibilities as alpha, the complex politics of the supernatural world, her fears about the darkness she'd touched. He listened with complete attention, offering insights when asked, but never pushing, never demanding more than she was ready to give. "Are you afraid of what I might become?" she asked him as evening approached, the question that had been haunting her since the witch's revelations about their shared bloodline. Rowan considered the question seriously before answering. "I'm afraid of losing you," he admitted, his honesty catching her off guard. "Whether that's to the darkness in your heritage, or to a decision to return to your old life, or to any of the 100 dangers that exist in our world, but afraid of what you might become? No. I've seen your heart, Emily. I've seen how you choose compassion over convenience, courage over safety, healing over harm. Whatever power you inherit, whatever abilities you develop, I trust you to use them wisely." Something shifted in Emily's chest at his words. A recognition of truth, of possibility, of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. When she looked at Rowan, she saw not just attraction or gratitude, but the potential for something deeper and more lasting than she'd ever experienced. As night fell and the pack settled into defensive positions around the property, Emily made her decision. "I want to stay," she announced, her voice carrying clearly in the stillness. "Not just because you need a healer, or because I'm curious about my abilities. I want to stay because this feels like home. You feel like home." The last words were directed specifically at Rowan, and the smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He stepped closer, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Once you fully commit to this world, to this life, there's no going back to what you were before." Emily smiled up at him, feeling more sure of anything than she'd ever been. "I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. With you, with the pack, with whatever comes next." The kiss that followed was soft and sweet and full of promise, a seal on agreements spoken and unspoken, a recognition of bonds that had been forging themselves since that first stormy night when she'd chosen to heal rather than to fear. When they finally broke apart, Victor was watching from a respectful distance, his expression thoughtful and perhaps a bit amused. "Interesting," he murmured, just loud enough for Emily to hear. "I've never seen the alpha quite so settled, as if something he didn't even know was missing has finally been found." As the full moon rose over the forest, painting everything in silver light, Emily stood surrounded by her new family. Wolves in both forms arranged themselves in a protective circle, their amber eyes reflecting the moonlight like scattered stars. Rowan's arm wrapped around her waist, anchoring her to this new reality she'd chosen to embrace. Magic thrummed through her veins, not the desperate, burning power of battle, but something deeper and more sustainable. She could feel the forest around them, alive with supernatural currents and hidden mysteries. She could sense the emotional bonds linking each pack member to the others and to their alpha. And underneath it all, she could feel the potential for so much more. Adventures yet to come, challenges to face, a heritage to explore and master. The witch's parting words echoed in her memory, warnings about corruption and the seductive pull of shadow. Emily knew those warnings contained truth. The darkness would always be part of her now, a source of power and a constant temptation. But she also knew she wouldn't face that challenge alone. Looking up at Rowan's face, seeing the absolute trust and growing love reflected in his amber eyes, Emily felt ready for whatever the future might hold. She had found her place in the world, not the safe, predictable life she'd once known, but something far more dangerous and infinitely more meaningful. The moon climbed higher, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Not in challenge or threat, but in welcome. The sound was taken up by others, creating a chorus that seemed to celebrate new beginnings and the bonds that tie supernatural creatures together across all the wild places of the world. Emily added her own voice to the song, not as howl, but as laughter bright with joy and anticipation. Whatever came next, she would meet it as part of this pack, this family she had chosen, and that had chosen her in return. The future stretched ahead of them, full of mystery and possibility, and Emily had never been more ready to embrace the unknown.